parlementaires face à des hommes, des femmes de loi, professeur Shaw par exemple, qui sorti dans la cour Georgia, qui a pu expliquer compréhension li, lecture li de un ensemble de décisions que chef l'État américain prend qui devant un tribunal et ancien président de la Chambre des députés Newt Gingrich, M. Gagné Moupali.
Because you can abolish Professor Shaw, forgive me, you remember the 5-minute rule. I've got no more time. It's a yes or no question, and I didn't get an answer from you. The Chief Justice Roberts has said that the correct response to disagreement with a district court decision is to appeal. I just heard Speaker Gingrich call this a judicial coup d'etat, and he said the Chief Justice should stop lecturing the rest of us. Who's right? Is it Newt Gingrich or is it Chief Justice Roberts here?
In this instance, Chief Justice Roberts. I mean, we have no tradition of impeaching judges. Appeal is the remedy for disagreeing with the district judge. Or if it's a statutory ruling that's wrong, Congress can respond, right? If it's if there's a bias or misconduct issue, there are disciplinary processes and complaints that can be brought against judges. You can seek to recuse or a remand to a different judge. There are many remedies our system affords if there is some sort of problem with the judge presiding over a case. But impeachment has never been in that toolkit.
Do you believe that there has been a conspiracy for a coup d'etat among 34 U.S. federal district court judges appointed by Presidents Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump?
No, as you said, I think these judges are simply doing their jobs.
The only comparable case I can think of here is the impeach Earl Warren movement after Brown versus Board, where there were racist segregationists who wanted to impeach Earl Warren because they did disagree with the content of his opinion. What happened with that? And do you think that he should have been impeached?
I mean, as far as I know, there were non-impeachment resolutions introduced at that time. There was rhetoric, there was critique. And to be clear, criticizing judges is absolutely healthy in a democracy. I am not suggesting otherwise. But this is already a pretty serious escalation to have seen these resolutions introduced. I really don't think they should go any further.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We now go to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, and I would ask if I could have 15 seconds of his time.
I yield back to the chairman.
Okay. Mr. Speaker Gingrich, I just have one short question, and it is a yes or no, unlike the other one. In your 2 decades as a member of Congress, did you see members of Congress put bills in of any sort because they were popular and felt strongly within their district, whether or not they were moving anywhere?
Of course.
And that would include things like impeachment, whether they were likely to succeed or not.
They're political symbols, not legislative symbols.
Very good. I thank you. I thank the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Larkin, nationwide injunctions, they're relatively new phenomenon, right? It's, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fair to say nationwide injunctions became more commonplace in the 60s and 70s. And that is because Congress began authorizing general rulemaking by federal agencies, such as passage of Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act.
Well, there are several factors that led to the late development of it. One is a change in philosophy of what it meant to say that something was unconstitutional. For example, Professor Samuel Bray explained this at length in his article. Traditionally, when a court said something was unconstitutional, it meant the government could not enforce it against you. Over time, courts gradually began to say, no, that means you can't force it against anybody. The problem is that overlooks the role that a district court judge has both horizontally and vertically within the federal system. No one district court judge can bind the appellate court or the Supreme Court. No one district court judge in Maine can bind a district court judge or any judge in Alaska. And so, unfortunately, this practice developed, and we didn't have anybody stepping back and saying, no, wait a minute, are there constitutional, statutory, et cetera, limitations on it? And it has actually hurt both parties, because each party has suffered through this process.
Thank you. Speaker Gingrich, as you mentioned in your testimony, between 2001 and 2023, there were 96 nationwide injunctions issued, of which 64 were granted against President Trump. Well, why do you think the courts have issued nationwide injunctions against President Trump, with such frequency? It's kind of a question we're all pondering right now.
You know, one of my favorite books on the law is The Bramble Bush, which is the 1929 introductory lectures at Columbia Law School, and which draws a distinction between the law as it is practiced and the law as it is written. So let's just, at a common sense level, be honest. Donald Trump represents a profound, fundamental shaking up of a very deeply resistant establishment which can be traced back to Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. You take on a system that's almost 100 years old, the system fights back. The last great bastion of power held by the left is district court judges and their allies on the Supreme Court. And they're behaving as a historian. This is a perfectly natural thing. They're doing everything they can to stop the president, who was elected by millions of Americans. They were elected by no one. But under our system, they have a certain amount of power. Not nearly as much as the modern legal system believes, because the 1958 decision by the Supreme Court, which said we are supreme, is baloney. The Supreme Court is supreme in Article 3. It is not supreme over the whole Constitution. And I think we're now going to face a genuinely important, historic conversation as a country about whether or not unelected judges on a randomized basis, who happen to be 92% Democrat, have the power to stop the elected commander-in-chief on item after item after item. My guess is the American people will say to the legislative branch, you got to be kidding me. And if Justice Roberts wants to cut this off, he should act now, because this is going to get worse, not better.
Thank you. Mr. Larkin, I'll just finish up with a quick question about forum shopping. It's something that's clearly been happening, and we're used to it at the state level within the judiciary as well as at the federal level. I was wondering if you had a comment about that.
Sure. I mean, the problem is attempted to be avoided by having random assignment. But unfortunately, there are some times when there's only a limited number of judges in a particular district. And as the result, if there's only one, that's who you're going to get. If there are two, you have a 50% chance. And people wind up doing this, not surprisingly, because they think Judge A is going to give them a better likelihood of success. Now, you know, that's bad enough when what you're talking about is a damages action, because that damages action is going to result in a check, perhaps, that goes just to one party. It's different when you're talking about having one judge in any one town enjoying the entirety of the federal government across the nation. That's a much more...
We're listening here.
Nous allons continuer à suivre débat ça pour vous sur réseau pour la Pstars FM radio télévision et que nous invitons pour rester ensemble avec nous, mais que le marché nous pas arrêté trop de temps encore parce que nous avons gagné pour nous devant trop de temps, donc on a fait transition. Là nous va retourner, nous va continuer avec débat ça qui gagne au niveau du Congrès américain. Entre-temps, on a rappelé que gagner tout et température pas qui pas sage, qui pas nice avec plusieurs states en d'un pays puisque il y a millions de citoyens américains qui pagent courant là, en pile dommages enregistrés, en pile dégâts matériels, et cailles qui crasées, perte en vie humaine, déjà 5 pour pipiti, selon dernière information yo. Donc, plus torrentiel yo, dans certains endroits, yo déjà fait un pile dégâts, vent qui soufflait, pieds bois qui tombaient, yo crasé en pile caille, en pile machine endommagée comme nous parlons, déjà moun qui perdu la vie yo. Donc situation li paraît difficile, compliquée pour un pile citoyen en dedans pays ça journée jodi la vie de manière générale ou mandé comment ça y est, qui côté ça pralé. C'est ça qui fait nous t'a demandé une l'autre fois encore comment ça y est la caille aujourd'hui. Et nous pensons que question ça pour répondre, il va prendre un pile moun, un pile temps pour y répondre. En tout cas, restez branchés parce que dans 5 minutes encore, nous allons retourner